Welcome to the Wellbeing at Work panel. I'm Diluk Dias, CEO of AEI Group, one of the founding sponsors of Getahead Festival, along with Tech Department. Wellbeing at work is a topic that's something has great personal significance for me. Work was stressing me out, specifically the music industry was stressing me out for the last 18 years or 20 years, and a couple of years ago it culminated in a major health trauma for me. I broke my leg spectacularly and had to take almost a year out of work. But I did learn some very hard lessons about how important it is to focus on your health and well-being. Now for me personally, my health and well-being is my number one priority, and it's become the number one priority for our team in terms of caring for them. In our panel today, we're going to try and dig into the root causes, what's causing ill health at work. We're going to try and understand the impact it's having on the workplace, but more importantly, on our lives and the lives of our families. And we're going to hopefully consider what happens when companies, individuals, managers, entrepreneurs, team members really take health and well-being seriously and the benefits that come from doing that. And finally, we'll look at some of the strategies and actions and hopefully get some takeaways for you that will enable you to bring well-being into the workplace. Can I just ask, who in the audience is an entrepreneur or has their own business? Okay. Who's a manager in a company? Who works for a company as a team member? So all of us. Who's experienced ill health in the workplace? Okay. I think on that note, I think it's time to introduce the panellists. George, can you kick off, please?
Hi, so my name is George and I'm the founder of How Mental. We are an Instagram community of over 30,000 people, and we also are a mental health advocacy platform. So we help people to start their own mental health movements, whether that's as an individual or in the workplace.
Hello, I'm Darren. I'm the MD of a company called Motive Unknown. We're a marketing company working in the music business, which gives me no immediate grounds for being on this panel, but for the fact that I've had experience in this area and generally am now quite a passionate speaker for well-being in the workplace as regards the music industry, which I'm sure we'll come to.
Hi, I'm Ben, founder of a company called Yotto. We're producing a hardware device for young children, preschool, trying to keep them away from screens as long as possible. And there's been a lot of talk here today about the role of phones and screens on mental health, and we're starting it very, very young, because we feel like the generation of children now are complete guinea pigs. We're sticking iPads in front of them, and we have no idea what it's doing to their brains. And we're just talking about it now. There are primary school teachers telling me that kids are coming to school not able to hold pencils. They can swipe like demons, but they cannot hold pencils. Previous to this, I founded a company called 7 Digital, which we grew from 2 people to 140, taking it public in 2014 on the AIM market. And I've been a very good friend of Diluk's through many years, and we've both had our ups and downs with stress. There's good stress and bad stress. Stress in workplace for me is not necessarily about when you're struggling to make payroll or you're having to fire people. Horrendous how that is, and that is very stressful. But stress is also about when times are good and your brain's frazzled because of all the opportunities. So looking forward to getting into that a bit.
Hi, I'm Jana. I founded a company called the 888 Collective. We help people with mental health issues get back into work. There's over 300,000 people every year in the UK with mental health issues lose their jobs, which costs UK businesses £8 billion a year. A year and a half ago, I was one of those people. I lost my job because of mental health. I was at work. I started taking antidepressants. I became very ill and unable to continue to take the medication because the side effects were so strong. I decided to stop taking them. And then 5 weeks later, I was on a 24-hour watch as a high-risk suicide patient. And I stayed like that for 5 weeks. And my journey getting back into work was incredibly challenging. I took my recovery on like a job. And I'm now developing an app and looking to help as many people who are exactly the same as me get back into the workplace and get back into positions of power that we left. And also, if you weren't in a position of power, help empower people to get themselves into work.
Hello. Bloody hell. Hello, I'm Simon Gunning. And for those of you who've just come from next door and think you are listening to the CEO of Calm, one of us is an imposter, because I'm also the CEO of Calm, but it's a different one. So I'm the CEO of the campaign against living miserably. We are the mental health charity for people that don't like mental health charities, and we behave in a way which is very, very dissimilar to the likes of Samaritans and Mind, whilst respecting what they do immensely. We are much more likely to smash the windows and run away. We have evolved from being a very single-purpose charity, so very much highlighting the terrible, what we refer to as the holy shit number about referring to male suicide being the single largest killer of men under 45 in the UK. And we've grown from there with campaigns we've done over the last year or so, and we've become more of a kind of a popular movement, I think, where people look at that badge, the Calm badge, the campaign against living miserably, and they say, I reject Brexit, and I reject Piers Morgan, and I reject Donald Trump, and I want the world to be more calm. I want the world to be more tolerant and based on notions of old-fashioned things like kindness. We have a product which is a service which is working very, very well called Calm Companies, where we're taking our very democratic and modern approach to mental health care into workplaces, into corporations, organisations, and helping people work with their workforce in a way which is so far removed from putting a circle of plastic chairs around and talking about our feelings that it isn't true. We come at it very much the same way we come at our campaigning with things like Project 84 that you might have seen we did and various other stuff. You don't want that? I'll have it.
Thanks, everybody. Clearly, work is stressing us out and having a real impact on our lives. I think I want to kick off by asking the panellists, what's been the most stressful situation in work and how did you deal with it? George?
Probably should start from there. Most stressful situation at work. So as an entrepreneur, I think, like a lot of the rest of these guys here, it's incredibly stressful. Probably one of the worst moments was actually towards the beginning of this year. So at the same time as running How Mental, I'm also developing an app and working with developers. I'm not sure if any of you have ever done that before. It's quite a stressful experience, not being one myself. And the whole team essentially, one developer felt disrespected by another developer. The situation blew up. And I had to really go back to basics in myself to try and manage this, internal kind of personal problem that they had, and trying to get them to speak about it. You realize that actually, we hadn't instilled a culture in the organization where, these things could have been avoided in the first place. And so, it was trying to bring two people together after the fact, and it taught me a valuable experience about being able to actually have a kind of alignment and holistic perspective on dealing with relationships in the workplace. So that took a lot of a toll on me.
Mine was I forget how long ago it was now. I'm getting old, the years all blend in. I think it was 2 or 3 years ago, but I just simply overcooked it when I was working. I've run Motive Unknown for about 7 years, and for about 3-4 years it was only 2 people. And we started getting a lot of work in, we were doing very well. And it sort of went from a drip to a steady pour to a veritable fire hose. And I didn't handle it well, so I kind of buckled in the face of it. I started phoning up my dad, asking if he'd ever had anxiety attacks, because I thought it was might run in the family. And it's quite funny, my dad was like, no, I'm fine. My dad runs quite a large business himself. And then it graduated from that to just having like a 6-month spell with really nasty depression that was fucking horrible, couldn't get out of bed, which is kind of weird because I'm a big fan of remote working, and my business doesn't have an office, but if you're depressed and you don't want to get out of bed and you have no office to go to, it doesn't help, in that sense of trying to give you reasons to carry on. So in my case, yeah, it was definitely a bit of a low point, which is mercifully now behind me, but I think it taught me a lot in that sense of, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. So here I am now.
I think mine was. I think I had a full-blown panic attack once when it was in a very intense period. I was trying to raise some funding for the business to keep going, basically, and it had taken forever. It had taken like 9 months, and eventually we had signed a deal with Dolby and a company called Imagination Technology, strategic investors that put quite a few £1 million into the business, and we'd organised an event to announce the deal, and it was an incredible thing. It was like brilliant, should have been brilliant, but leading up to that, I'd been so stressed working on it. I'd been drinking too much. I'd been getting no sleep. And on the day of the event, basically in the rehearsals, I started to just freak out and I couldn't breathe. And I remember thinking, what the fuck is happening to me? Nothing like this had ever happened before. I actually just didn't tell anyone. I walked out before the event had started. I went to one of these Medi centres, where you pay to get the GP. And they put an ECG on me because they thought I might be having a heart attack. And the ECG was kind of weird. It was all squiggly lines, which shouldn't have been there. And he said, well, I'm not sure you can do this event. And he gave me some tranquilizers. And in the end, I had to get one of my senior team to basically step in and do the speech for the event. I think I basically managed to say a few words at the beginning and at the end. And I just couldn't do it. And that was really scary. I really didn't know what was happening to me. And I think it was a panic attack caused by just stress, basically.
I think I kind of mentioned how things went wrong for me when I was at work, but I think what's interesting about it is that I was somebody who was always over-capable. I was always on it. I was always taking on more work. I was always saying yes to absolutely everything. And on the side of me working, I used to work in television, I used to produce live TV shows. On the side of working, I was also doing stand-up. So in the evenings, I was going and I was doing gigs, and I was having a great time. And I took the first holiday I'd taken in ages. I took 10 days to go up to Edinburgh to do a stand-up set. I was doing a 20-minute set that I was being paid to do. And that was really... alarm bells should have been ringing, and I was having a great time. But when I came back, what I realised that I'd been completely out of control of my life, and I slowly became more and more sad. And my friends were sort of starting to say to me, Jana, you're a bit sad. And I ended up going to my doctors, getting prescribed with medication. But I think for me, it wasn't anything that went wrong. For me, I didn't realise that I was overstressed. I didn't realise that I was taking too much on. I just did it. And because I could do it, people kept giving me more to do. So I think that that's kind of the worst thing that happened to me at work, was that I was really, really good at my job and I was really trying hard to do other stuff. And it all came together and kind of went bang in a big way.
We did a bit of work with Harry's Razors, who fund us quite well, and UCL. As an audit into what constitutes happiness in the UK in 2017, and it's just male focused, and it was very clear that there are two things: there's relationships at the top, and then there's work underneath, and really everything else. There are 50 other things, and they all sort of pale into absolute insignificance after that. So I think it's not surprising that when we think about happiness at work, we're really defining happiness across our entire lives. It's a profoundly important part of where we are. We put on a different hat and we behave differently, clearly, when we're at work to how we do in other places, but it's a very key part of our core psychology. Actually, for me, the hardest thing I ever had at work was when I wasn't at work. I ran BBH advertising agency. I ran their global digital business, and we sold BBH, and I didn't have a job. And that was really, really difficult. As a middle-aged man without a job, I found that very, very, very stressful. And I think we can learn lessons from that as well about how that defines us as a person. Recently, we did a thing called Project 84 with ITV, where we put 84 statues of people who've killed themselves on the roof of the ITV building. And we were on this morning for 3 days, having Calm in residence there, talking to people about really, really terrible, terrible issues. And that was actually, to my mind, the scariest thing ever, because for 3 days, the whole of my organisation was on absolute red alert of terror that had we done the wrong thing, had we done something that could provoke some form of copycat kind of behaviour. Fortunately, the advice that we'd been given by many psychiatrists and various other people was correct, and nobody did, but that was pretty bloody terrifying.
Thanks, everybody. I think this discussion has highlighted that there are internal and external reasons for sort of ill health in the workplace. Now, Simon, I'll be quite curious to understand what you feel are the real major causes of ill health in the workplace, and whether the responsibility lies with the individual, as perhaps has been suggested by Jana, or whether it rests with the company and leadership in particular.
Yeah, I think actually, having spent quite a lot of time in both the music and the marketing services industries, both of which are particularly prone not only to stress but to relentless and remorseless measures of self-examination and brutal competition. I'm very interested to work with a lot of agencies now, and indeed a lot of record companies and other people, and be able to talk about this stuff, because you just can't really talk about it. So BBH, the company I work for quite a few years, has a principle of everybody being good and nice. It's only half true. Everybody is good. And the ability to really to have any form of humanity is completely not there whatsoever. I'm sure lots of people experience that all the time. I think the way that we engender different behaviours comes from example and comes from leadership. I'm really happy to work with very closely with Havas, the French marketing services group at the moment, who are a key part of Calm. Their CEO, a guy called Zavris, is very, very open in talking about his daughter, who has lived for, I think, 3 years on a psychiatric ward. She's 17. It's awful. It's terrible. But when he left Adam and Eve DDB to go to be CEO at Havas, he made it very, very clear that the only way he could change a culture to get away from that kind of advertising agency, record company sort of culture and startup culture, tech culture, was to live it. So he could write down a culture and he could put it in a PowerPoint deck and he could put it in a desk and he could present it 3 times a day, but it wouldn't really do anything unless he started living it. So his anecdote is that he was in a pitch for a big piece of business. He got a text message from his daughter saying that she needed him. He put his stuff down, he closed his bag, and he said, "I have to go," and he walked out. And it was, I think that was profoundly brave for the CEO of that kind of business to do that. And he says that was the best thing he'd ever done, because a year later, when he goes to the pub with his people, every single time somebody will come up and say, I want to work here because you did that. So in instilling a culture which is based on humanity and based on the fact that we are people, whether we are in or outside of work, is the starting point to finding a balance of happiness across both those states.
Thanks, Simon. Ben, they say that the fish rots from the head. What would you do in your experience as an entrepreneur over the years? Is there anything you've done differently? And do you agree with the statement that culture, it's responsibility of the company's leader to sort of instill a strong message about sort of what is acceptable and what's not acceptable from a work perspective? And what would you do right now if you were starting over?
Well, hindsight is a wonderful thing, and now that we have greater awareness of mental health, definitely I would have done things differently, and I would have done them for sound business reasons. I think Michael made the point in the earlier session that a healthy workforce, a happy, healthy workforce is good for the bottom line. So I think we did some good things by accident without knowing that we were doing them. There were, as a startup, you become like you are a family, as you can relate to, absolutely. So when there's a death in the family, when not an employee, never had that, thank goodness, but when an employee's father dies or something, you feel like he's one of your family, so you give him whatever he needs or she needs. There's no corporate policy on this stuff. It's not like you hear about big corporates saying you can only have 1 day off if someone dies in the family, and they don't take into account the situation at all. So we did stuff like that, and we were by accident we were very family friendly. We were very good with people having kids, and the amount of companies that screw up when one of their best team members, who happens to be a woman and happens to have a baby, they screw up because they make it really hard for her to continue. You hear all these stories about women leaving the workplace because they can't manage childcare. I've got 2 young kids, and I'm a father, and I know how important that is to spend time with the kids for the father and the mother. So there's a few things we did like that, but there's other things that I didn't realise. There's things like relationships at work, and there's other policies that we should have had to help the mental workplace, and it would have been good for the bottom line, no doubt. Hope that answered the question.
Yeah, I think so. Darren,
you're not sure, are you?
no, thanks, Ben. Darren, obviously you've experienced ill health at work with yourself. What impact has that had on the company and your colleagues and productivity, and what's?
I mean, I think it's one of those things that you'd sort of give passing attention to when it's not happened to you. So like everything, you see things on the news and you sort of think, oh, that's a shame, but you don't really see it as a call to arms, or I don't. I shouldn't infect the rest of you with my own apathy, but I think having learned from it and realising how unspeakably bad it was a twofold thing. I mean, I think for us, we're still a small business. I think it's quite difficult because you don't, particularly in what we do as a marketing consultancy, it doesn't scale well. As the company grows, you just need more bodies. It's not a product that you're selling that can scale and make money while you sleep. So there's a thing there where we have to try and balance all of this out. In my case, I think it was basically a wake-up call to measure happiness within the business. I don't think it hadn't occurred to me before that to just make sure everyone was happy and doing what they're doing. It's changed the way we work in the sense that we just have a culture now that's a lot flatter, a lot more open. It led to me introducing a profit share scheme with the team, because my view was, if there are points where we have to work hard and we all have bad days, at least when we're working hard, everybody can benefit. And I think things like that, and just trying to be the change you want to see, at the risk of using an overused maxim, was a real vital part of it for me, in terms of making it a sort of preaching from the top down by also doing it. So making sure I take my holiday allocation, making sure that everybody else thinks about this stuff, not being afraid to take everyone out for a nice big meal. And just, it's the little things that help, but also just making sure that there's a culture within us as a business that allows everyone to speak up if they do feel like they're having a hard time or anything else, so we can immediately act on it. I have to say, though, beyond that, I think the bigger thing was, my own issues were caused by myself. So I think there was a sort of slight ludicrousness to bringing it upon myself, in my view, by not self-managing my own situation well. However, looking around and, subsequent to my issues, a friend of mine who's sort of reasonably known in the music business had written an article about the fact that there was, an endemic kind of problem in the music industry as regards, anxiety, depression, stuff like that. I then wrote an article to sort of back him up, and we did a show about it, and we've done panels about it. Sadly, that's led to a lot of people getting in touch to tell me how badly they're struggling within the music business. And actually, I consider myself lucky, either by design or by chance, that the guys on my team and the people I work with, they're a lot more mellow than me. They're all better people than I am. They're more organised, they're generally more chilled, and they're very centred, and everybody seems very cool. But beyond that, to hear from people working in the music business about going on holiday and hiding in a room from their other halves or their family, sitting on the phone obsessively looking at email because they're scared of what will happen if they don't, or guys are saying, I haven't seen my newborn child for 3 days because I've been working and then at a gig and then asleep, and when I get up and go out, the baby's asleep and blah blah blah. Really, really fucking heartbreaking stuff. And I think more so than my own situation, that's the thing where these days I feel like there desperately needs to be change within my industry, but I think most industries, to address that.
Thanks, Darren. Jana, do you agree that the response, a lot that the individual can do in your own sort of situation? You seem to suggest that you could have taken more responsibility yourself. Do you think that's the main cause of ill health in the workplace, or do you think that there are wider external factors that are causing this? What's really causing this sort of ill health or lack of well-being in the
I think if we had the answer to what causes mental ill health, we would not be all sitting here. I think that there are a few things. I think that, yes, there are a lot of things that companies can do now. They can bring in policies that mean you can be much more open and honest about your mental health. There are different workshops you can do. I go into companies and train people how to spot mental health issues. Like how can you see when someone is starting to struggle? How can you approach somebody? What language should you use? Like, these are all things that should be happening in the workplace. And I believe they are starting to. You know, this is a movement that is happening, which is wonderful. Obviously, there's a long way to go. But on the other side of that, we spend more time with ourselves than anyone else. And we owe it to ourselves and everyone around us that we're asking for support from to take responsibility, accept responsibility for our own mental health issues. There's 3 ways you can treat mental health issues. There's therapy, there's medication, and there's lifestyle change. We are all in control of that one, the lifestyle change. And I built over time, whilst I was recovering, a tracking form that keeps huge amounts of data visible to you. I've been doing it for 1.5 years. And I now manage my bipolar. I have medication, I do therapy, but I also can manage my behavior based on the chart that I track myself with. If I start to go down a little bit, then I'll drink half a cup of caffeinated coffee. It will pop me back up into my normal. However, when I'm my normal, if I drink a whole cup of coffee, that will make me manic, and that will affect me. And it will have massive knock-on effects, and that will affect me in the workplace. So I do think it's really important for there to be for work to be put in on both sides, basically.
What impact, when you were, at the times where you weren't feeling your best, what impact did that have on your colleagues, and did you feel that they were able to support you, or your employers able to support you?
I mean, the problem with me is I started taking antidepressants, SSRIs. They have quite a lot of side effects. They have a huge amount of side effects. I don't know if anyone's ever opened one of those packets before. One of the main side effects is that your symptoms actually increase for the first 2 weeks. The side effect I got, which I found the most irritating, was I had to yawn every 2 minutes. Like a proper full-on yawn. And I was trying to work with a team of people making a live TV show, and I was doing this every 2 seconds because I was literally trying to hide a yawn, and I couldn't function properly. I wasn't on my A game. I was slightly what I like to call zombieified. My brain was slow, and it did have an impact on my work colleagues. Now I know all the things I know, should have actually just gone to my line manager and said, listen, I've started taking this medication for 2 weeks. I'm going to have some pretty strong side effects. Can I tell the team, and can we just get these guys to pick up these few things? But I didn't, because I was afraid I'd lose my job. Television, it's a freelance world. If you take a day off, you don't get contracted the next time. So I believe that was my responsibility.
So as well as like leadership qualities and those kind of things, and how you can change the way that people behave culturally, there are measures that you can put in place as a company. Lots of people try to do it, but they don't use it. So we have this product Calm Companies, and we go in to meet lots of people and talk about, we have a helpline, so that the main part of our business is running a helpline for members of the public, and we do the same with a dedicated helpline for companies. And lots of people say, yeah, we've got one already. We say, well, go and have a look, see who's using it. So organisations will have a Bupa helpline, and nobody uses it, because it's inaccessible, because the brand and the accessibility, the way that people feel that fits with their everyday lives is completely out. Mind do amazingly good work, but Mind in the workplace encourage you to wear a green ribbon to support other people. I mean, we're not going to do anything. So we go deeply culturally into the organisation, and we provide services that mean that people will actually engage with it. And actually, having left the kind of organisations that need that stuff, Calm is a calm company, but it's great working for now the organisation that I do, because you can muck about with it. So we scrapped holiday. There is no concept of holiday whatsoever. You take whatever you need, and as long as your line manager approves it, it doesn't matter. Because if you're taking 6 months off and you're doing a job, that's all absolutely fine. We have lots of different sorts of extracurricular services inside the workforce, inside the office that help people along. But we also temper that very clearly with the principle that we've got a really important job to do, and that you're a member of a team, not a member of a family, and that we combine that reliance on each other to be as good as we possibly can be with every single tool that we can think of to help people be as good as they can be, and it works.
Thanks, Simon. Culture seems to be quite a sort of important theme here, and obviously, I'm quite curious to understand from perhaps George to kick off with this. How easy or difficult is it for a company to embrace these kind of initiatives when they're a large company and driven by, say, market share and share price, versus a smaller independent company? And what's your experience and what's your view on sort of the role of culture in establishing a workplace, a well-being culture at work?
Yeah, so I think this is actually really funny because obviously I work in mental health now, but I actually come from a background in finance. And I used to work for a company that shall not be named, but they, as soon as you enter their building in Canary Wharf, they have these like 5 huge words written around which are their culture, and I remember all of them because, I could reel them off now, like respect, integrity, service, excellence, stewardship, because that is why I wanted to work at this company, unlike all the other companies in finance. I got there to realize that actually these are just words that they have to make so large because they don't know how to instill them in their behaviors. So, I didn't last very long in that company. And for me, the realization was that culture is not just something to talk about. It's something which we actually have to instill from the top down and from the bottom up. If you don't see your manager acting in the way that the culture apparently is meant to work, it just doesn't work. There is no culture. And I think that, I kind of mentioned going, from my own experience being an entrepreneur, realizing that instilling that culture is not something which, you can just do from a kind of business lens. Culture is really personal. It is really holistic. It is about the individual, and kind of building on Jana's point as well. It's the whole individual that we need to take into account. Their emotions, their physical health. That ordinarily we might not bring into the workplace, but I feel like we do have to start embracing it because we are ultimately people, and even as the sort of founder myself, I have my own problems. And so it's nice to feel supported from the rest of my team that, they're going to help me through this too. Especially because as an entrepreneur, you are bringing your entire person into the business. So, I've been through my own bouts of depression, suicidal thoughts. It has gone really far down. And so to be able to instill a culture that opens that up, I think is fundamental.
Sure, thank you. Jana, does this differ, does the approach to well-being differ amongst the different companies that you've been talking to over there?
I think obviously it does, because obviously each company is at its own stage in starting to understand mental health, starting to see how important it is. I think companies, like you were saying, it does help the bottom line. At the end of the day, if you're signing off a lot of people for stress, surely it's better that they don't have to go off in the first place if you have management. But I actually just wanted to reiterate what you said, is that, I now have built a business on the worst thing that ever happened to me. And it's building and it's working because there are so many other people out there that are exactly like myself. But I'm really open and honest about having bipolar. I actually have to take a medication called lamotrigine, which is the same medication that people with epilepsy take. So it's really funny. People tend to ask me if I'm ever going to come off my medication. And I'm like, well, you wouldn't ask someone with epilepsy if they were ever going to come off their medication. But one of the side effects of this medication is I have 0 short-term memory, which is actually quite funny in business situations, because I'll be sitting down with a business forecaster talking about, funding and things that are happening in my business. And I'll ask a question and he'll be like, yeah, we literally just spoke about that. And instead of me being embarrassed about it or it getting in the way, I'm just obvious about it. I'm just open about it. And everyone that's in meetings with me just laughs about it. And I think that's where we have to get to with mental health issues. Mental health issues exist. They're fact. We have symptoms from them. But they don't define who you are. They don't define your capability. And the more we speak about it as a factual thing, the easier it is to function within a work environment, moving around them and supporting them.
Sure. Thank you. We've touched on the benefits of embracing well-being in the workplace, and certainly Michael Acton Smith has pointed out that companies aren't doing this out of the goodness of their hearts anymore. They're doing it because there is a crisis, there would seem, and actually there are some really tangible benefits, business benefits to focusing on this. Simon, perhaps you could elucidate on what these benefits are,
Well, lost days. You're talking about the financial benefits as to why companies should. Yeah, lost days. Single largest reason for lost days at work. But then there's the minute by minute, hour by hour productivity. If you're hiding away and having a really shitty time, then you're not going to be very good. Also, things like retention. So we haven't lost a single person in the year and a half that I've been there. I'm not saying it's down to me, but I think it is down to the organisation and how it operates that we haven't lost a single person. Nobody has resigned. That isn't always good, of course. So you need to manage those situations where you want somebody to resign, or you need to move people along in certain ways. But nobody that is good, nobody that is contributing has left our company because they feel that they're valued, they're looked after, they're appreciated. And the bottom line also comes in other ways. So the kind of brands that we work with instill different sorts of behaviours in their organisations. I think it was led not necessarily 100% with total conviction by Unilever. So their principles of doing good in the world, leading to get greater dividends for their shareholders, certainly is a nice position, and they have done a fair amount of that. But we work with Top Man a great deal, who instill that and fund lots of things that we do because they want to do good in the world. Harry's Razors, who are trying to fight off Unilever with Dollar Shave Club, and their very, very deep pockets have decided that the way that they'll differentiate their brand in the world is by actually caring about their customers. And that sort of ethos goes right the way through an organisation. And there are more and more and more purpose marketing organisations popping up, which is a horrible term, but I think what we're seeing, I hope what we're seeing, is a realisation that doing good leads to good, that looking after the people that work inside your organisation leads to better work, better attendance at work, greater tenure in roles, greater stays inside an organisation, because you don't want to keep rehiring people all the time because it's bloody expensive and it's bloody hard to get people up to speed and that kind of stuff. You want good people to stay with you. But to my mind, the greatest thing that we have is that we have, in those kind of organisations that are working very well with kindness, with mutual respect, and with very, very clear guidelines in how we behave towards each other and around our joint goals, we have a greater attitude towards success. We don't have a grabbing of success, we have a sharing of that, we have a sense of mutual belonging, all those sort of cliches, but ones that don't exist in most organisations. I mean, I've been working for 23 years, and it's a new thing to me. I haven't worked anywhere that's had that, and I've worked in lots of businesses that should be really, really cosy and cuddly, and actually are full of people that put the jackets on the back of their seats and no doubt go and hide in the toilets for 3 hours. People that will grab success from other people's desk when they're not looking. And you've got to undermine that because it's short-termist.
Thanks, Simon. George, what have you seen from, obviously you've worked in the city, I presume, in finance,
Yeah.
and you obviously learned perhaps how not to to do this. What benefits have you seen of taking a different view or to this in your company?
Yeah, so I think that it's so funny because, you just, even yesterday, right, I was at an event, an HR event, HR tech actually, and the company that I worked at, I was telling someone that I used to work there, and she goes to me, oh, they're not the employer of choice anymore, so, wouldn't worry about them. And it's funny because ultimately the people are what make your company, right? So just like Simon was saying, like if you can really attract and retain those people that you want to have in your company, it makes a huge difference, you know, in terms of just like coming into the office, you know who's going to be there. You know, you're not ready for people to just, you know, you're not ready for that to be this revolving door of people coming through. And to have a kind of, you know, to have that kind of stability and certainty, I think is, you know, obviously people in this day and age, you know, they want to change, they want to grow, they want to learn more. But to be able to maintain that constant in someone's life, whether that's from a financial perspective or in terms of, you know, emotional, like understanding what kind of workplace they're going into, I think it has huge benefits. Yeah. And I think, like, you know, if you can align all of those perspectives from people, so you don't have, you know, someone in HR working from a very different perspective to, you know, the line manager and everyone else, that really helps.
Staying with George for a second, in your opinion, what initiatives are working well and will work well in any organisation? What would you recommend, and what have you seen?
I feel like I have a bit of a left-wing perspective, not in terms of political, just like in general. So, you know, I practice meditation myself. I love meditation. I think, you know, it centers me, and, you know, it's something that we like, you know, initially we'll think, okay, that's just some like Eastern stuff. I mean, when I first thought of meditation, I thought everyone was just closing their eyes. So, you know, to be able to kind of give people different ways to understand their well-being. So something like meditation. I think, you know, one of the companies that I work with, for example, part of their culture is, you know, they have these stickers that they put everywhere around the office. And so it's something really unique to them, you know, like I don't go into many companies and see these kind of really, like, you know, personalized design kind of stickers. But by integrating something around mental health into those stickers, I mean, it just got so much more visibility. People understood it, and it became something which was, you know, a priority in the business. So really integrating it into, you know, the heart of everything that they, like all the other things that they do, it just becomes a part of that. Obviously, at the same time, you've got sort of mental health awareness. So a lot of people know what depression is. They know what anxiety is. I mean, at least they might think that they do. But, you know, to understand what bipolar really is, to understand what psychosis is, like people don't know what these things mean. So to actually elevate awareness around what they are, you know, creates a lot more empathy. So I think that, you know, those are just three of the kind of main things. But yeah, there's loads of different techniques. So
Great. Ben, you got something to add to that? Thanks, George.
Yeah, I was just remembering a couple of things that we did in the past. So one was rush hour avoidance. Imagine, I don't know how many of you are commuters that have to come in at the same time every morning and hit the rush hour, but what we did at 7 Digital was actually allow people to come in either earlier or later and avoid rush hour, because what a terrible way to start your day. What a very horribly stressful way to start your day, having to battle through throngs of people. That's not a great way to start your day. So, but with my new company, and we're blessed that we don't have many people, so probably I'm not sure it can work at a bigger scale, but we now have really no fixed time or place of work. The only requirement is that we have, or once a week, we all get together to meet in person, because I definitely believe physical presence is important, but we don't have any fixed hours or place of work. It's really about what you get. Do you get the stuff done that you have to do? And if you can do that in an hour a day, brilliant. It probably means that some days you could work 2 hours, but other days you're working way more. We've only got 3 full-time people and a few other freelancers, so it seems to be working so far. And it's brilliantly family-friendly, because most of the people in the company have young children. So that's incredibly important, because there's so much pressure on parents to go to the nursery or the school to do this and that and do childcare. Childcare costs are enormous. So, yeah, that seems to be working. I don't know whether it can scale to like 100 people, but yeah, no fixed hours or place of work.
Thank you. Darren, what's working for you in your company? What have you seen working in the companies, in your clients' companies, for instance? 'Cause you're working across a large number of notorious music industry.
Yeah, I mean, in the music business, it always gets like an arched eyebrow when people go, you know, where's your office? And we're like, we don't have one. And there's always this kind of like, you know, sort of thing that goes on. We don't have one because we don't like commuting. I think it's wasted time. It's like I'd fuck spending 3 hours on a train every day. I'd rather to be honest, I mean, I'm running the company. I'm the least organised guy in my business, and I'm also the laziest. So if we can compress our entire working day to 4 hours, I'm quite open about the fact. But as Ben said, as long as the work's being done, I don't really care what the hours being worked are. I think because we're a consultancy, you have to respond to the clients, and the clients work sort of 10 to 6-ish. But equally, we do try and manage it, and we push back because we have clients in the States and California, so we try and manage that so we're not doing meetings late at night and all that kind of thing. Similar to Ben, though, we meet up once a week for same reasons, just mainly for social. It's nice just to be with your team. And then, we just have quite a sort of liberal philosophy around going on nice lunches and stuff like that, because it's the little things, really, I think, can just help, and stuff like that is not, my view is we don't have an office, we don't spend loads of money commuting, so, it's not a great expense to my business to take 6 people out for lunch every now and then.
So I just remember one major issue with our plan. So we got offered by this, we're in a space called EdSpace, which is a co-working space for education technology companies. And we got offered a summer intern from America, who brilliantly qualified at college. So it's an 8-week placement. It's not costing us a penny. They get put up in Farringdon. It's brilliant. And so we were like, where do we sign? But now we're realizing, oh shit, we need to be there because the poor intern can't just be sitting there in the office on their own. So one of the flaws with my no fixed time of fixed hours of work and place is that, it's a bit tricky when you have some situation like that. So any tips that anyone's got how to solve that dilemma would be very welcome.
Simon's mentioned unlimited holiday, and I think that's quite fashionable amongst some of the tech companies, and I know Netflix introduced this. Does anybody here work for a company that has unlimited holiday, other than ours, obviously? Could you sort of share your experience, perhaps, and tell us what, did it actually work in practice in your mind?
Hi, I work in San Francisco at a tech company in Silicon Valley. And actually with unlimited holiday, most of my coworkers wouldn't take them, mostly out of guilt and shame and just seeing that the managers were working. So when everyone is working, you're obviously not going to be the 24, 25 years old being like, hey, I want to go to the beach. So we didn't take enough holidays, myself included. I didn't take any time off for the first year, but mostly because I didn't see anyone else doing it, right? So I think unlimited holiday can work very well as long as you guys have been saying for, quite some time now, there is a culture that shows the example, right? That sets the correct example. So if you see the managers, if you see anyone, your line manager or whatever, taking some time off, then maybe you will. But someone else we were discussing earlier mentioned maybe having a minimum holiday and then unlimited. That also could be great. But from my experience, which obviously is very, very limited, got only one job because I'm only 25. But it didn't work out at all. So that's something very interesting, I think.
It hasn't worked that way for us, but I can see exactly, especially with a Silicon Valley sort of approach to holidays. It hasn't worked that way with us at all. I think we have. I've certainly taken plenty of holiday. It's nice, and really the reason in presenting that principle of unlimited holiday was not because I love you all and I want you all to relax. It was when you're in the office, we really need you to be really good, and if you are exhausted, you're not going to be really good. So as long as you're delivering what your line manager wants you to do, as long as the line manager is doing what their line manager wants to happen, there is no logical reason why you wouldn't. I think, Ben, having no fixed workplace is really good in lots of ways, but as you say, scaling that is really, really difficult. And actually, I find a lot of people really like coming to work. I like going to work, and I think a lot of people do. I like getting there, and I think it's something really interesting. I can't remember where I heard it. Somebody said that when you're at work, you can be your ideal human. You can adopt a persona. When people ask you to do something, you goddamn do it. And when somebody asks your opinion, you bloody got one. Of course, when we go home, we're all complete idiots and we have no idea what the hell's going on. And I revert to being a 14-year-old boy and just throw strops all the time. But I think there is something valuable about in work-life balance might be a really good thing. It might be a really good balance to be able to be somebody when you're in an office and surrounded by colleagues, and somebody else when you're not, maybe.
Yeah, Jana, what initiatives, in your opinion, are really successful and are working for companies that you know? And
well, actually, I think I don't have that much experience going back into a bigger company because I went back to work. I went to work for a big SEO company when I was getting better, and I was really afraid of where am I going to go work? How am I going to get back into work? Who's going to hire me? Do I tell them, oh, I've been off work for 4 months because I wanted to kill myself, or do I just tell them I went travelling? I wonder how many people have actually gone back to work and said they've been travelling when actually they've just been at home in their pyjamas, just barely surviving. And the only reason why I got that job was because a friend of mine gave me a job as a PA because I was too afraid to go out and get a job. And I was officially the worst PA in the world. And I think my forgetful memory would mean I'm going to be the worst PA forever, so I probably shouldn't go back to that job. But so basically, I haven't been back into many really big offices, but I have worked with a lot of people who are trying to get back into work or who are struggling at work. And I think that it's really funny because everything you're saying, it's almost like a combination of them would work really well. People who aren't feeling very well and have mental health issues, the first thing that they usually do is withdraw and isolate themselves. So if you don't have a place of work, no one's really going to know how quickly you're slipping. However, if you do have a place of work, you get to go there and people might notice things. One of the first things you can notice about people who are struggling is their presentation. If someone's usually really sharply dressed or always does their hair or something and they start to slip with their presentation, that's a really good sign to pick up on. So it works both ways. If you had an office where you didn't necessarily have to be at your desk at 9 a.m, you could commute around it, and if you wanted to work from home for a couple of days or not, that kind of, to me, would be the perfect scenario, especially for mental well-being, because sometimes I need to just work from home for half a day, and because I'm the boss, I can do it. But anyone I work with works from wherever they want.
I think like just one word which I felt throughout all of that is just flexibility. You know, like it is just being flexible with the people that you're working with, you know, with yourself, and, you know, making that a part of everything, because honestly, we're all people, we're all prone to slip up. We're not just robots coming in every single day, as much as we sometimes think that, or we wish that we were. And if you can give that to someone else, I mean, for me, it's like, you know, when you're being micromanaged by someone and you just hate life. So it's a bit like that, you know, just like, don't micromanage yourself, don't micromanage other people, and you're going to be good. So, yeah, a little bit of flexibility.
Thank you. Before we move to questions, perhaps it would be nice to get the panel to sort of suggest one thing that they would recommend or they intend to do in order to sort of increase well-being or introduce initiatives of this into the workplace. And yeah, once you've got the mic, why don't you kick off, George, please? If you could recommend one thing that's going to be the most effective at addressing this issue, what would it be?
It's really hard for me to not say flexibility, seeing as I've just said that, you know? Yeah, I think it's really just about, you know, and communicating that flexibility in everything, right? You know, so whether you are a manager or you are being, you know, you're employed by someone else, or you're being managed, just having the environment where it's open enough to say, you know, would you mind if I worked from home today? You know, or would you mind if I, you know, like work from just over there? I mean, you can just, so long as you can create that openness and communication, I think that, you know, communication is the cure ultimately. So, yeah.
I mean, based on the straw poll of the room, if people are entrepreneurs and are ostensibly running their own businesses, I think it's just lead by example. You know, it's got to be something that, you know, if you run the business, you you set the tone of the company culture. You define explicitly, really, what's acceptable, what's, you know, how within this operation people will communicate, how they will relate even, and all that kind of thing. So I think bringing that change in and effecting it from top down is critical, not least because I've seen, you know, too many businesses that would say, well, you know, we've sent an email around to tell everyone we care and that they can go and speak to the HR person if there's a problem. And it's like, but that's not it. You know, you've got to, you know, it can't be used as an excuse to tick the box and go, yeah, we gave a shit for 5 minutes about mental health because we sent the email and now we're all just carrying on crushing the life out of our staff. You know, you've got to, it's got to be meaningful and you have to see that through. So I think for me, it is just, you know, be that change, and in doing so, your company will grow with a culture that's endemically more healthy and more suitable for a path forward that doesn't involve everyone getting sick.
I remember some times of extreme stress at 7 Digital, and I realised I had two strategies for dealing with stress. One was quite good and one was quite bad. One was basically going binge drinking. That's the bad one, by the way. And the second one was some form of exercise. And I know that exercise helps me a lot, and it's varied according to what exercise it has been. I used to play badminton with Dell.
Thrash me.
That was very stress relieving. Running is probably my thing now, and I play a bit of golf. That's quite stress relieving. But some form of exercise. So supporting your team, supporting your employees to have some form of exercise, and it not be too prescriptive. Like yoga doesn't work for everyone. Yoga is brilliant, but it doesn't work for everyone. So supporting their sort of physical. I really strongly believe in physical exercise, and it could be yoga, or it could be going running, or it could be going to gym classes, or weightlifting, or kickboxing, or whatever it is. Support them in that activity that suits them.
I would say empower people. We work in a culture where everyone is like, well, most of the cultures are, you know, you're trying to get to the top of the ladder as quickly as possible. But actually the people at the top of the ladder who are really good at what they do help other people up the ladder. So to create a work environment where you're empowering people to feel good about themselves, to feel capable, to feel like they're doing a great job at work, especially if someone's struggling with their mental health, empowering them is probably one of the best ways you can actually help and support them, and positive reinforcement. And also, like I said before, empowering people to understand who they are and the issues they're having. A lot of people don't really understand that they're having any issues until it's too late. But if we can empower people to take control, accept responsibility, and also work really hard and have a great time, then mental health in the workplace will hopefully become just a positive thing.
All of that. Certainly movement and exercise is a great thing, and so don't sacrifice, don't think that short-term monetary gain is going to get you to a long-term position. So just taking some of that profit back in. Everybody at Calm has free gym membership, has access to any form of counselling they want every 2 weeks, has unlimited holiday. We get fruit every week, a big bowl of it. And those kind of things are easy to do. They're really, really easy, because in the long term, it's not going to affect the well-being of your business. I would say don't fall for faddism and be human. Putting a poster on the wall with a phrase isn't going to get you anywhere, and lots of people will stick with a phrase and think that if they keep saying "make the boat go faster" or some such bollocks, it'll get them there, and then you just stick with it and stick with the fucking mantra, and it doesn't work. So just be human and just treat people as humans, and just and be aware of their differing states. But of course, most importantly, contact Calm and become a Calm company.
Thank you. Questions for the panel?
Hello, I'm Dominic. Very quickly, what do you think is stopping all of the things that you're talking about, a lot of the positives actually taking place? Is it mindset? Is it normative behaviour? Is it policy? Is it industrial mindset? What's stopping us talking about mental health in the workplace and saying, I can't come in because I'm mentally ill today?
A stigma. It's bloody hell. Why am I holding the microphone? I just did a bit. It's such a deep-rooted stigma that there's so many people who are able to sit in rooms like this and put their hands up, and it's brilliant. But there are so many more that can't. And that's based certainly on behaviours, but it's based on such deep-rooted cultural nonsense. My parents were children at the end of the Second World War, and they were exposed to rationing on food, right? So they grew up in their entire lives thinking that the world was one full of paucity, that things were not abundant, and that limited their expectation and instilled stoicism, certainly in certainly all the male members of my family, when that's passed along. And this strange conflation that we have, for example, with strength and stoicism, that a strong person is a silent one, is just so counterintuitive to what we know is right. As a species, we communicate. As a species, we have stupidly advanced frontal lobes. That means that we left the cave and we made weapons and we communicated when we hunt down the wildebeest. I'm making this up. This isn't necessarily factual, but communication is at the very heart of what makes us work as a species, yet we have so deeply ingrained culturally a resistance to do so when it comes to certain taboos, that there are certain things that we are just not able to talk about. And it's really, really strange. And it's really interesting to me as well that the conditions we're discussing are not, they don't require chemotherapy. In a lot of them, they require talking, and yet that's the last thing that we're able to do. It's not a panacea, right? It's not going to, and I don't think a suicidal person was ever prevented from taking their life by just simply talking. I think it's much more complex than that. But the deep-rooted and ingrained cultural propensity to link strength and silence is very, very deep. What we do is, rather than shout at people to say, go and get formal medical health care or just fucking talk to each other, we try to bring along, we try to do it through very Trojan horse type principles. So we had a thing, I'm really going on now, sorry. We had a thing called the Best Man Project, where we had Loyal Kana and his best mate, and we had Rio Ferdinand and his best mate, and we had Prince William and his best mate, talking about the fact that, asking the question, why is it you can only be really nice to your best mate once in your life when you're his best man? And trying to break down those things through behaviours. So that's very much with a male specificity. But in the workplace, we've got such a long way to go, because not only are there gender-specific problems, and not only are there long, sort of all-encompassing universal cultural issues, but the culture of work is one of shut up and get on with it, and delivery, and getting up the next part of the ladder, and all the stuff that we can say out loud that we know the bottom line will get better when you've got a happy workforce, actually is kind of undermined by the decay of carbon, by the 4-year political cycle, by cycles, by short-term gain, rather than long-term vision.
I do these things. I open my mouth and then don't know why I've opened my mouth. Basically, I've got a friend who had a nervous breakdown in November, and now they're struggling to keep hold of their job. What do you suggest? Because the company is labelling them as a bad employee, so they just want to get rid of him.
Yeah.
So what's the best way to go forward for that?
Well, it's interesting actually, because it sort of goes back to this point that you were just making, is mental health is seen as a weakness. We only suffer with symptoms from our mental health issues for a period of time. I don't have all of the symptoms of my bipolar all of the time. I just have them for a period of time, and I need to manage myself and that time. And workforces only really need to give extra support through a time. If someone's suffering with depression or severe anxiety, they won't be suffering from it all day, every day for the rest of their life. I would say to your friend is clearly, if he's having trouble actually doing his job, and he is unable to complete the work, he probably does need to take a little bit of time off. There are lots of things he can do. I have a workshop, you can get in touch with me, where I teach people how to take control, accept responsibility, take control of their mental health, so they can start tracking everything they're doing, so they can understand the good habits they have, the bad habits they have. And actually, there is no need or reason, if your friend had a mental breakdown in November, there's no reason he can't get himself back on his feet very quickly. He just needs to be given the right tools, and that's what my company does. And really, these tools should be given to everyone in every company.
Okay, thanks.
Continuing on that vein then, I've worked with or on HR teams for 20 years, but I'm also a coach as well, and I've been working with people in the music industry for some time. I'm interested to know what HR teams, in particular HR directors, because it's usually HR directors are responsible overall for cultural change. What do you think they really need to do differently to really fully embrace and bring in and turn around the culture?
I'll have a crack. I have worked in very big companies. I worked for BT, I worked for United News and Media, and actually I might kind of be a bit controversial, because I think that a cultural change shouldn't come from an HR director. I think it has to come from the top, and it has to come from within. It can't be something imposed by an HR team. I think it has to be lived and breathed amongst the whole company. And it has to come from, if the company still has the founders, that's often the best place it can come from, because it's genuine and authentic, and it's not like a hired gun CEO comes in and says, right, I'm going to impose a culture. Cultures generally cannot be imposed anyway. You can push things, you can make some changes and kind of like push things along to try and encourage culture, but culture has to be, I think, natural and evolve from within it. It can't be imposed. I'm not sure that answers the question, but
I mean, my view is broadly the same, which is, I was going to say, do your level best to convince the CEO to adopt the culture, because it's the same difference. I mean, you know, there's large music companies I've seen that do the token emailing everyone to say they care, and they might put a poster up by the toilet and sort of think that the job's done. And then you get other businesses, AEI being a good example, where from the top down, you know, the culture has been instilled such that it normalises it for everybody, because it is that thing of like, look, if the chairman's doing it, then everyone else does it. And, you know, it's a bit like I used to work for Virgin. No one wears suits at Virgin because Branson never wears a suit. And it's a similar sort of thing of like, you know, what happens at the top trickles down through the rest of the business or businesses. So personally, I think it is that. But is that genuinely possible for a senior HR person to convince someone at the top to change their view? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. But I think that's where I would start, because, yeah, I've just seen it too many times where there's a token effort made and it's totally worthless as far as I'm concerned without that full, you know, complete support.
Can I just add, I really want Del to speak because I know that he does this in his company already, but I just thought, like, you know, there's a lot of different ways to go about it, and I totally agree with these guys. It has to come from the CEO as well. I was working with a company where the CEO wanted to make mental health, you know, part of normal working practice, but the HR director didn't. So, you know, you have like opposite experiences, but also, you know, as the HR director, you have quite a lot of power. So if you wanted to put something out to the employees saying, hey, look, you know, what do you think about mental health? I mean, I think it was Lloyd's last year, like they voted mental health as their charity of the year. You know, it's not that difficult to get the people to show their interest in that, which you can then very easily take to the CEO and say, hey, look, this is the interest. So, yeah, don't be afraid of, like, taking different techniques.
I think that the term HR has actually quite negative connotations in the modern world. And I agree. I think what needs to be done is that it needs to be repositioned as something more positive and more proactive. We've scrapped the word HR. I personally hate the word HR because it suggests risk mitigation and process and legislation and government. And generally speaking, from what I've seen in large companies, if you've got a meeting with HR, it's generally not a good conversation you're going to have, you know. So HR could, this is not always the case, but could be perceived as the sort of evil necessary in order to protect the company's interests. And I think that's what a large company's view on HR is. That's what it exists to basically protect the company's position in terms of not getting sued for tribunals and following procedure. So what we did is we scrapped the word HR. We have a people in Google. They don't have a HR director. They have a people operations director, and that's a very common term. Certainly in the UK, I see a lot of companies which have head of culture or director of culture, and it's phrased in a more positive and kind of proactive way rather than the, oh God, going to see HR. So I think that's what needs to be done first. And I wholeheartedly agree with what Darren and Ben said about it needs to come from the top, arguably the founders, and that's only really possible in smaller companies which you can drive that through culture, and it's much harder in companies which are driven by, you know, delivering value to shareholders or share price or satisfying returns for VCs. So that's my view on HR. Any more questions, or are we done for the... Can we thank the panel for their participation, please? Thank you.